Under the vast breath of the desert, where the sand hums softly to itself, and the horizon blurs like a mirage caught between dream and memory, there was once a night that never ended. The moon hung low and full, silvering the dunes with a glow that seemed almost alive, an eye watching, a heartbeat pulsing through the stillness. The wind moved like a whisper across the stones, carrying scents of sage, of sweat, of something ancient, something that had once been a promise. It was said that in this place the world was thinner, the veil between spirit and flesh trembling like silk in a lover's hands. And here, where everything could feel, the story of Coyote's lover was born. The desert had always known love. It existed in the trembling heat that kissed the air at dawn, in the slow waltz of dust devils and the sigh of cool nights. But love in this land was not soft. It was a fever, a hunger. It came to those who wandered too long beneath the stars, who listened too closely to the songs of the wind. Many who sought solitude found instead an ache that spoke their name in the darkness. The old ones said that was how Coyote called his lovers, through longing, through absence, through the music that only silence could make. There are places in the desert where stones remember. Smooth, round, and ancient, they hold the echoes of laughter, of footsteps, of prayers whispered to indifferent skies. When the moonlight strikes them just right, they shimmer faintly, as though the earth itself blushes at some secret memory. That night, every stone shimmered. The wind did not rest. The air itself felt expectant, alive with the tension of something about to begin. Coyote's name was once a word for desire, not the kind that passes quickly, but the one that grows slow and deep, like roots beneath dry soil. He was neither god nor beast, neither man nor shadow, but all of these things at once. His laughter created stars. His sorrow birthed rivers. His love stories carved mountains and burned forests. The world knew him as trickster, wanderer, thief of hearts. But beneath his chaos was something more tender, something that no tale had yet captured, the ache to be seen not as a spirit or legend, but as a being capable of love. And the desert, eternal and knowing, listened. It was in her nature to cradle such longing, to nurture it quietly beneath the hum of cicadas and the perfume of night-blooming flowers. Her silence became a lullaby, her dunes a bed of shifting gold, and somewhere, beyond the reach of any campfire, her heart began to beat faster. The moon leaned closer. The stars held their breath. Something, someone, was coming.
The stories say it began with a sound, a low hum, almost human, almost wind. Then the faint rustle of bare feet over sand. She came walking from the edge of the horizon, her figure soft against the silver light, as if shaped from moon itself. No one knew her name then. Some said she was born from a wish made by the earth, others that she was a fragment of the night sky fallen to wander among mortals. Her eyes held the calm of deep water, yet her steps left warmth in their wake. The desert recognized her, not as stranger, but as memory returning home. When she moved, the air thickened. The dunes shifted, following her rhythm. The coyotes, usually loud and restless, fell silent. Even the stars seemed to dim, as though to let her shine alone. She carried no words, no offering, no prayer, only a quiet curiosity, a feeling that she had been called. Something unseen had whispered her here, and though she could not explain why, her heart beat in time with the wind's sigh, as if answering a question not yet asked. There was magic in that stillness, in the way the desert watched her. Beneath the surface, the spirit stirred, those who slept in the bones of cacti, who hid in the cool veins of stone. They felt it too, the electric pull between two forces that had circled each other for centuries, waiting for a night like this. Coyote, restless and wild, and the one who would soon know his name not as myth, but as touch. The night deepened. The moon traced her shape as she walked, gilding her skin with light. The wind played in her hair, teasing it into threads of silver. Around her ankles the sand rose and fell like breath. She did not fear the emptiness. She had known solitude too long for that. But something inside her trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation, the feeling that she was no longer alone. In the distance, a sound answered her, a soft, rhythmic echo, almost laughter. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, woven into the hum of the land. She stopped, listening. The desert held its breath again. Then a shape emerged over the ridge, fluid as smoke, golden as flame. He moved on 4 legs first, then 2, then something in between, shifting with the ease of dream. The eyes that found her were sharp and knowing, filled with mischief and melancholy in equal measure. Coyote had come. But this was not yet their meeting. This was only the prelude, the inhale before the sigh, the spark before the fire. He watched her from afar, unseen yet deeply felt, circling the edges of her awareness. She felt the weight of his gaze, the pulse of his spirit in the air. And though she had never known him, her body recognized him in the way one recognizes a forgotten song. Every step she took forward brought her closer to a fate both beautiful and cruel.
The desert began to hum louder now. The night birds took flight. Even the stars seemed to sway in slow rhythm. The old spirits whispered through the wind. A warning, a blessing, a promise. They had seen this before, how love between mortal and spirit ends not in stillness, but in echo. Yet they watched anyway, drawn by the gravity of what was about to unfold. Coyote stood at the edge of the light, his silhouette framed by the glowing curve of the moon. His fur shimmered like bronze dust, his eyes 2 molten suns. Around him, the air seemed to bend, heat rising in waves, though the night was cool. He tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. A smirk played across his lips, though beneath it lingered the faint trace of sadness, an awareness of what his desire might cost. He had seen countless lovers come and go,
each leaving a new story behind, each teaching him another shape of loneliness. But this one, she was different. He could feel it in the rhythm of her breath, the way the night itself seemed to move with her. She was not a passing dream. She was something he might wish to keep. And that, he knew, was dangerous. The desert murmured again, a low sigh that brushed against her skin. She closed her eyes, feeling it, as though the air itself touched her with invisible hands. The moon above seemed to pulse brighter, its light spilling across the land until everything shimmered. When she opened her eyes, she thought she saw him, a flicker of gold, a flash of eyes, gone in an instant. And yet her heart leapt as if it had been touched. That was how the legend began, not with a kiss or a promise, but with the slow recognition of two souls circling each other through time. The desert, ancient and watchful, bore witness to the first stirrings of a love that would defy every rule written by gods or spirits, a love that would taste of dust and honey, of laughter and mourning, of night and dawn entwined. They say that on certain nights, when the wind is soft and the moon swells full, you can still feel it, the echo of that first glance, the way the air trembled when she met his gaze. The coyotes sing louder then, their howls rising like prayers for something lost but never forgotten. The desert blooms for a single hour with ghostly white flowers that vanish before dawn, their scent carrying a memory too tender to name. And if you listen closely, beneath the wind's sigh and the shifting sand, you might hear it too, the heartbeat of the earth remembering, the murmur of a story too beautiful to die, forever caught between desire and silence, the beginning of a myth that was and will always be Coyote's lover.
Beneath the molten eye of the moon, the desert trembled as two forces began to move toward one another, drawn not by chance, but by the slow, inevitable gravity of longing. The night was thick with promise, and every breath seemed to shimmer between shadow and light. In that hush, Coyote revealed himself fully, no longer a flicker at the edge of her sight, but the shape of wildness itself, an embodiment of laughter, danger, and desire. He stood tall, bare-chested under the starlight, his skin kissed by the bronze of countless suns. Around his neck hung a charm of bone and turquoise, humming faintly as if alive. His hair dark as volcanic glass, framed eyes that caught the moon and returned it softer, sadder. Those eyes could disarm gods, could coax truth from silence, could turn danger into temptation. He smiled, not the smile of a trickster then, but of something deeper, something raw and searching. Coyote was not born to love gently. His heart was a restless drum, his spirit too wide for cages. He carried within him the ache of freedom, the kind that thrills and wounds in the same touch. To love him was to be consumed by his laughter, to lose yourself in his shifting form, never certain where truth ended and illusion began. Yet beneath his teasing and his riddles, a loneliness pulsed,
a longing to be seen not as the wild, but as the man behind it. He watched her approach, that figure carved from moonlight, and for the first time in centuries, the trickster forgot his own cleverness. She moved like water poured from the hands of the gods, slow, graceful, inevitable. Her body shimmered with the pale hue of dawn just before it breaks, her hair a cascade of silver shadow that caught every sigh of wind. Her bare feet left no mark upon the sand, and yet the earth seemed to lean toward her, desperate to remember her weight. She was neither mortal nor spirit, but something caught between, a creature of longing. In her, the purity of desire met the danger of curiosity. Her name was whispered by the dunes in tones of reverence and sorrow, Ayana. It meant eternal blossom, a name too tender for the fire she carried within. Once human, perhaps, once a daughter of the red earth who sang to the spirits at night. But when she had wished long ago for a love that could see her soul, the wind had taken her words and never returned them. Since then, she had wandered, following the echo of her own wish. And now she stood before the one who had heard it. Coyote tilted his head, a smirk ghosting across his lips. "You've been calling me a long time," he murmured, his voice rough velvet, warm and dangerous. The sound threaded through the air, stirring the sand around her ankles. Ayana's gaze did not waver. "It wasn't your name I called," she replied softly, though her pulse betrayed her calm. "It was for someone who would know me."
The grin deepened. "Then you called right." He stepped closer, and the world seemed to narrow until there was only them. The night, the scent of sage, the faint electric charge between two bodies learning each other without touch. The desert held its breath again, as if afraid to interrupt the choreography of something ancient unfolding anew. Her eyes searched his face. There was mischief there, yes, but beneath it, something unexpectedly fragile. A loneliness she recognized too well. She reached out, fingers trembling slightly, and brushed the edge of his charm. The turquoise flared briefly at her touch, a heartbeat of blue light. "It sings," she whispered. "It remembers. Every name, every kiss broken by dawn. It hums when it finds something worth remembering." Their eyes met, and the air between them grew taut. No words could bridge what already pulsed through the silence. He smelled of smoke and rain, of stories half told. She smelled of moonlight on wet stone, of things sacred and untouchable. Each carried what the other lacked. His chaos met her calm, her purity met his fire. The first touch was almost nothing, his hand brushing her shoulder, the faintest graze of fingertips. Yet it rippled through her like lightning through still water. Her breath caught, and she felt the desert tremble beneath her feet. Coyote's smile faltered for the first time, replaced by a wonder he had never allowed himself to feel. "You're not afraid," he said quietly. "Should I be?" His gaze darkened. "Everyone is. I am not everyone." The wind swirled around them, curling into patterns that shimmered faintly with light. The desert spirits watched, unseen, whispering through the air, "They meet again." For in every age, it was said, Coyote found her, the same soul in different skin, drawn to him across lifetimes, always ending where it began, beneath the same moon, with the same ache. Coyote reached up, tracing the curve of her cheek with the back of his knuckles. He murmured, "You shouldn't have come here. You don't know what I am." Her lips parted, a soft exhale. "Then show me."
Something in him fractured between laughter and surrender. He leaned closer until their breaths mingled, until the scent of her became part of his. The heat between them pulsed, alive and dangerous. It was not yet a kiss, but it was everything that comes before. The stillness, the trembling, the pull that bends the world. She felt it too, the ancient recognition that made her chest ache. There in his eyes she saw the story she had always searched for. Not safety, but truth. The kind of love that burns away illusion, that devours and renews. And though she knew such things never ended gently, she did not step back. He studied her in silence, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you know what happens to those who love me?" Her gaze softened. "They remember you." He smiled slow and sad. "Always, and that's the curse." The desert sighed then, the wind sweeping through as if to cool the fever rising between them. The dunes shimmered faintly, echoing the rhythm of their hearts. Above them, the moon seemed impossibly close, watching with quiet hunger. Coyote took another step, closing the space until only breath separated them. "You are not what I expected," he said. "And you," she breathed, "are exactly what I feared." The tension broke in a shared smile, gentle, knowing. Their laughter melted into the night, low and intimate, the kind that carries the weight of promises not yet made. Around them, time itself seemed to bend, folding the past and the future into a single suspended heartbeat. In that moment, they were no longer spirit and wanderer, trickster and dreamer. They were simply two souls who had found one another again, drawn by a gravity older than the stars. Their eyes spoke the words their lips did not dare. "I have waited for you. I have found you. I will lose you again." And the desert, that eternal witness, smiled softly in its silence. It knew how such stories end, but it also knew this truth, that every beginning, when touched by love and danger, is holy. The night deepened around them, rich with unspoken vows. The coyotes began to sing in the distance, their voices rising like an old hymn to the moon. And though they had not yet touched lips, the air itself carried the taste of what was to come, wild, tender, inevitable. For love in this land was never gentle. It was the storm disguised as stillness, the flame hidden beneath cool sand.
and as they stood beneath that endless sky, their hearts already knew they had stepped into a myth that would remember them forever.
The desert changed after that night. The air, once indifferent, now shimmered with a quiet ache, as if it too had tasted something forbidden and could not let it go. Every dusk seemed to arrive slower, heavier, drenched in the scent of memory. The moon lingered longer above the dunes, unwilling to retreat from what it had witnessed. And somewhere within that trembling stillness, Coyote and Ayana met again, as if drawn by an invisible thread spun between desire and ruin. They had begun to speak without words, a glance, a breath, a shift of sand beneath bare feet. Everything between them was communication now. The world around them pulsed in rhythm with their closeness. When he laughed, the stars flickered. When she smiled, the wind changed direction. Yet with each meeting, the tension deepened, twining tighter around them like the desert's own serpents. The pull was no longer curiosity, it was need. Coyote had sworn long ago never to love what the gods had made of flesh. His kind were bound by an unspoken law. Spirit must not give itself to the mortal heart. Desire between realms could bend the balance of creation itself. But laws meant little to him when she stood near, her skin glowing faintly beneath the moon, her breath tasting of night and promise. She was not a god's child, nor wholly human anymore. She was something else, a bridge between worlds. And she was the one thing he could not trick nor forget. Each time he tried to turn away, the desert betrayed him. Her scent found him in the wind. Her voice hummed through the stones. Even his laughter, his armor, his weapon, faltered when he remembered how she had looked at him unafraid, as if she already knew the story that would destroy them both. Ayana, too, was haunted. The touch of his hand lingered like fire long after he was gone, burning through her dreams. She felt him in every heartbeat of the night, the shimmer of heat over sand, the glint of eyes just beyond sight. She knew he was danger, that his love was not meant for mortal heart or immortal soul, but she could no longer remember how to stop wanting him. The desert spirits whispered warnings through her sleep. You are crossing the border of things that must not meet. But love, once awakened, obeys no command. It grows wild, feeding on risk. And Ayana, born of yearning, did not fear the cost of hunger. Their secret meetings became ritual. Beneath the broken ribs of canyon walls, where moonlight spilled like silver water, they met at the edge of worlds. Their words dissolved into breath, and the space between them trembled with what could not be spoken. He would trace his fingers along her jawline, stopping just before touch became possession. She would lean closer, daring the boundary, her voice barely a whisper. "Will the gods see us?" she asked one night, her tone a blend of fear and desire. Coyote smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "They already do." "Then why don't they stop you?" "Because even they remember what it feels like to want." Her heart quickened, the words slipping into her like wine, warm, dizzying, dangerous. He leaned in, close enough that his breath brushed her skin. The world tilted, the stars pulsed brighter. For a moment, it felt as though creation itself paused, waiting. Then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was the collision of fire and wind, of spirit and blood. The desert itself seemed to cry out. Sand rose in spirals around them, the dunes trembling beneath their feet. The kiss burned through every rule the world had ever written. It was defiance turned sacred, and as their mouths met, the stars began to fall. But pleasure, in that realm, was always shadowed by omen. The wind shifted cold, the moon, once tender, dimmed. Somewhere deep in the earth, a fissure opened, a wound in the order of things. The gods stirred in their sleep, sensing the tremor of forbidden union. Ayana felt it too, the pulse of something vast and terrible awakening. She broke away, breath trembling. What have we done? Coyote's voice was low, almost human in its sorrow. What we were always meant to. The next night, the desert would not sleep. The wind turned restless, and even the coyotes refused to sing. Every grain of sand seemed to him with consequence. Yet still they returned to each other, pulled by the gravity that had undone them. Their love became a secret carried by the land, hidden from the sun, but known to the moon. They met in shadow, beneath cliffs carved by ancient hands. His laughter softened around her, losing its bite. Her eyes grew bolder, gleaming with the wildness he gave her. Each time they touched, something in the world shifted, an unseen cost paid in the quiet language of the divine. There were nights when Coyote would vanish for days, torn by guilt, his spirit roaming beyond the horizon. He told himself it was protection, that by staying away he might keep her safe from the eyes of jealous gods. But each time he returned to find her waiting, her silhouette outlined in moonlight, her expression unreadable. "You can't keep pretending this is harmless," she whispered once as he traced the curve of her collarbone. "Every time you leave, the stars fade. Every time you return, the earth trembles. You think I don't feel it?" He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes shut tight. "I know, but I also know I can't stop." She smiled then, a sad, beautiful smile. "Then neither can I." Their bodies met again in the dark, moving with the rhythm of storm and prayer. His hands trembled as they explored her, reverent and desperate at once. The sound of their breathing mingled with the wind's sigh, the boundaries of their beings blurring until it was no longer clear where one ended and the other began. And yet, beneath the ecstasy, dread bloomed. Coyote could feel it, fate watching from the distance, patient, inevitable. He knew what the gods did to those who broke their order. He had tricked death before, mocked it even, but this was different. Love was a law older than mischief, and no trick could outwit its price. As dawn approached, Ayana lay against his chest, her skin glowing faintly with the residue of his touch. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression unguarded. "If they come for me, don't follow," he murmured. "I would find you," she said simply. He laughed softly, though sorrow flickered in his eyes. Even if it kills you, especially then. The desert wind howled at that, carrying their words into the endless horizon. The sun rose crimson, painting the sky in the colors of omen. Somewhere beyond, the spirits began to gather, the ones who guard the balance between flesh and dream. Coyote felt the shift, the change in the air that meant the gods were listening now. He looked down at her sleeping form and felt the weight of both joy and doom. For the first time in eternity, the trickster had not planned his own trap. He had simply fallen into it, willingly, completely. Love, he realized, was not the game he had mastered. It was the fire he had feared all along. And as the first light touched his skin, he understood the truth whispered by every myth before his. Passion that defies heaven burns twice as bright and ends twice as soon.
The night had never been so alive. The air shimmered with heat and silence, as if the desert itself held its breath, waiting to see if the world would break. The moon hung enormous above the dunes, swollen with light and longing, its silver bleeding over the land like spilled milk. Every grain of sand glowed faintly, whispering, singing, remembering. It was a night that did not belong to mortals or gods. It belonged to them. Coyote came to her in silence, his steps soundless over the trembling earth. The moment his shadow brushed hers, the wind rose in greeting, circling them in slow, spiraling devotion. His eyes burned, not with mischief now, but with something deeper, rawer. The wildness that had always been his armor had softened into awe. Ayana waited at the edge of a dried riverbed, the moon's reflection caught in her eyes. Her breath was shallow, her heart drumming in time with the pulse of the land. She had shed her fear like a garment and stood bare to the night, her skin gleaming with faint light, her hair spilling freely down her back. There was no hesitation left, only need, only surrender. When Coyote reached her, the winds stilled completely. The stars leaned closer, trembling in their constellations. His hand rose, slow as dawn, until his fingers brushed her jaw, tracing the line of her throat. The touch was reverent, almost prayerful. Her eyes fluttered shut, and the sound she made was neither word nor sigh. It was the sound of something eternal remembering itself. Ayana, he whispered, and her name seemed to echo across the horizon. She opened her eyes. "You speak it as if it's yours," he said. It was, before the world was born. Then the distance between them vanished. Their mouths met and the world broke open. The kiss was a storm, soft at first, then wild, sweeping through them until neither knew where one ended and the other began. The wind roared back to life, sand spiraling around them like firelight. Her fingers tangled in his hair, her body arching toward him as if drawn by gravity itself. The heat of him burned through her, fierce and consuming, yet she felt no fear, only the exquisite ache of becoming part of something vast.
The desert reacted. The dunes shifted, trembling in rhythm with their breath.
The dry riverbed shimmered and filled with phantom water, moonlit and alive. Spirits rose from the sand, pale and translucent, their voices a chorus of awe and warning. Overhead, the stars quivered in their patterns, their light bending until the sky itself seemed to pulse. Coyote lifted her, his hands strong against her back, his mouth trailing fire along her neck, her shoulder, the curve of her breast. Every touch carried the weight of centuries, the yearning of all who had ever loved what they were forbidden to have. Ayana's fingers traced the scars along his chest, each one glowing faintly beneath her touch as though her hands summoned memory. When their bodies joined, the universe shuddered. It was not a union of flesh alone, but of soul, of essence. The air thickened with their merging, light spilling from their skin in threads of gold and silver. The desert's hum deepened into a steady, resonant tone, a sound that seemed to come from the bones of the earth itself. All around them, life awoke. Flowers that had slept for centuries bloomed in an instant, their petals glowing like embers. The wind carried the scent of them, heady and intoxicating. Coyote's laughter broke through the storm, low, tender, almost disbelieving. He murmured against her skin, "I never thought I could feel this. You've undone me." She smiled through tears she didn't know she had. "Then let us be undone together." He kissed her again, slower this time, as if memorizing her breath. She could feel the tremor in him, the knowledge that this moment, this infinite heartbeat, could not last. The world was too small to hold such love. And yet they clung to it, to each other, as if by will alone they could defy the unraveling already creeping in from the edges of time. Above them, the moon dimmed. The gods were awake now. The desert wind shifted cold, cutting through the warmth of their embrace. The spirits that had gathered began to wail, their forms unraveling like smoke. The phantom river flickered, its light trembling before it vanished back into the earth. Ayana's body tensed. She felt it too, the pull, the demand, the reassertion of the order they had broken. Coyote held her tighter. He said, "Don't look away," his voice breaking. But she did, and when her eyes found the horizon, she saw the storm coming.
It wasn't made of wind or rain, but light, white and violent, rippling across the land like the tearing of sky. The god's punishment, swift and absolute. Her breath caught. She felt the desert recoil, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Coyote's eyes met hers, bright gold, fierce with both love and defiance. "They would take you from me." She reached for his face, her hands trembling. "Then let them find nothing left to take." The storm was upon them. The first flash of divine light struck the earth nearby, throwing sand into the air like flame. Still, they did not part. Their lips met one last time, a kiss that burned hotter than the gods' fire, a kiss that turned grief into eternity. The moment stretched, endless and fleeting. In that breath, they were everything: creation and destruction, joy and ruin. The world bent around their love, unable to contain it. Then the light consumed them. It was not death, not entirely. It was transformation, love made into legend. When the storm passed, the desert was quiet again, its dunes smooth and glimmering under a pale dawn. The air still smelled faintly of flowers that should not exist. And somewhere far off, a lone coyote howled, a cry so full of longing that even the stars wept. The riverbed where they had stood shimmered faintly, filled with light that refused to fade. Some said it was her spirit still waiting. Others said it was his laughter, trapped forever in the dust. But the truth was simpler, sadder, and more divine. In that place, the world had learned how to love and how to lose. Even now, when the desert night falls heavy and the wind turns warm, you can feel it, the pulse of what they became, the memory of two beings who defied the heavens, whose desire burned bright enough to leave its mark upon the bones of the earth. And if you stand there long enough, if you listen between the howls of the coyotes and the sighing of the dunes, you might hear their voices still, woven together, soft and eternal. Not as curse, not as warning, but as promise. That love, though doomed, is the only thing strong enough to shake the stars.
When dawn finally came, it did not rise gently. It bled. The horizon glowed crimson and gold, as if the heavens themselves were wounded by what they had witnessed. The desert was still, eerily, reverently so. Not a single bird sang, not a single breath of wind dared disturb the silence. The air smelled of lightning and grief. In the hollow where light had devoured them, the sand glowed faintly, molten beneath the morning sun. It pulsed once, like a fading heartbeat, before settling into stillness. Where their bodies had been, there was nothing now but a shimmer, a mirage that flickered between shadow and radiance. The gods had struck their judgment swiftly, yet something in their fury had failed to erase what love had carved. Ayana was gone, or rather she was no longer as she had been. Her body had dissolved into the desert's breath, her spirit threaded through wind and whisper. Wherever the sand moved, her presence lingered, soft, unseen, but eternal. When the breeze touched the cheeks of travelers, they felt her warmth. When it howled through canyons, they heard her cry. She had become the soul of the desert, the keeper of every longing ever spoken to the night. Coyote, though, endured, but not unchanged. The gods had not spared him, though they could not destroy him. His laughter, once golden and defiant, broke apart into something hollow. His eyes, still bright, carried the shadow of loss deeper than time. The trickster was bound to the land, cursed to wander forever, unable to find the one place where her scent still clung to the air. He searched for her in the dawns and the twilights, his paws treading paths worn by sorrow. Each time the moon rose full, he would lift his head and howl, a sound that tore the sky, half prayer, half confession, and the desert would answer him, her wind circling softly around his body, brushing his fur like fingertips. Their love continued in echoes, in motion, in longing that never found rest.
The old ones said that the howl of the coyote was not a cry of hunger, but of remembrance, that each note carried a story of the night when love defied the gods, of the woman who became the wind, of the spirit who would never cease to seek her. Even now, they say, when you hear that sound stretching across the empty land, you are listening to him calling for her, and her answering in sighs through the dunes. Over time, the desert changed. A new river carved its way through the earth where they had stood, its waters clear and trembling like light made liquid. It flowed not from rain, but from deep beneath the surface, where molten sorrow turned to grace. The people who found it named it the River of Whispers, for its banks always murmured softly in the night. No one could explain the voices that rose from it, nor why its waters remained cool even under the fiercest sun. But those who listened closely swore they heard two tones intertwined, one laughter, one sigh. The gods too could not undo what had been made. They had punished, yes, but the act of love had left its mark on creation itself. A force beyond their design now pulsed within the world, a reminder that even divine law bows sometimes to the gravity of longing. The desert no longer belonged entirely to them, it belonged to memory. And memory, as the gods soon learned, does not die. For Coyote, the punishment was endless reflection. Each time he found a shadow that reminded him of her form, it dissolved when he reached for it. Each scent, each echo vanished before he could grasp it. Yet he continued, because to stop was to let the world forget her. His steps became ritual, his songs became myth. The mortals who saw him thought he was only an animal, a clever scavenger of the night. They did not know that each gleam of his eyes held the weight of 1,000 lifetimes of love and loss. Ayana, in her endless diffusion, felt him. Whenever the wind moved across the desert floor, it carried his scent, smoke, sage, sorrow. She could not touch him, but she could embrace him in the way the air touches all things. When he lay down to rest beneath the stars, the breeze would curl around him, soft and cool, and for a fleeting instant he would dream she was beside him again. The earth grew used to their pattern, the wandering and the waiting, the howl and the whisper. Seasons changed, civilizations rose and vanished, yet the desert remained, faithful to their story. The dunes remembered every footprint, every echo, every kiss turned to myth. And though the gods had long since turned their faces away, the stars kept watch, glowing faintly each night as if ashamed of their silence.
Travelers who crossed the wasteland
sometimes spoke of strange things, lights flickering in the distance, the scent of flowers where no plant grew, laughter carried on the wind, though they were utterly alone. Lovers who camped under the full moon claimed to hear voices in their sleep, soft, entwined, murmuring in a language older than the world. The wise said those who heard the voices were being blessed. The fearful said they were being warned. Both were right. For to love in that land was to inherit their memory. To love was to risk the same defiance, the same undoing. Coyote's legend spread beyond the desert. Poets sang of him as the trickster who stole not fire, but love itself. Shamans called his name in ritual, seeking wisdom in his sorrow. His howl became the sound of the boundary between worlds, the cry that opens the door between spirit and flesh. And each time the wind rose in answer, it was Ayana, still speaking his name in a voice made of air and eternity. But there were nights, quiet and unseen, when the desert grew tender again. The moon would lower, heavy and red, brushing the dunes with the color of memory. On those nights, Coyote's silhouette would appear on the ridge, motionless. The wind would stir softly, circling him, and for a heartbeat the world would hold still, the two of them close again, though no touch could bridge them. It was not reunion, it was recognition, and that, perhaps, was the truest ending their love could claim, not the breaking of the curse, but the refusal to let it mean despair. They had been separated, yes, reshaped, rewritten into the fabric of the world itself. Yet they endured, side by side, in different forms, their connection whispered through every breath of the desert. At sunset, when the light burns gold and the air hums with heat, you can still feel it, the faint vibration beneath your feet, the soft ache in the wind. The story continues there, not as words, but as pulse, as song, as silence filled with meaning. Coyote still roams, the wind still follows, and the desert, their cradle and their witness, keeps them both, forever reaching for one another, forever almost touching, forever reminding the world that love, once made true, can never be undone.
They say the desert never forgets, that every grain of sand carries a memory. Every whisper of wind holds the sigh of something once loved, once lost. Perhaps that is the true essence of myth, not in the events themselves, but in the echoes they leave behind. Coyote's tale is no longer just a story of a lover and his beloved. It is the rhythm of yearning itself, the pulse beneath all hearts that have dared to love what the world forbids. His howl is not only sorrow, it is devotion stretched across eternity. When he calls into the night, he does not expect an answer, yet he sings because silence would mean forgetting. That is what love becomes when time devours flesh. It becomes remembrance. It becomes the sound that refuses to fade. And Ayana, scattered through wind and motion, has not perished. Her body is gone, yes, but her essence remains in every breath drawn under a starlit sky. She is the warmth that brushes a wanderer's cheek when he believes he is alone. She is the curve of air that caresses a dune's edge, the sigh that passes between stillness and storm. She has dissolved into everything, and in doing so, she has become eternal. Love, the myth teaches, does not end in union. It endures in distance, in the space where two souls can no longer touch, but still ache toward one another. There is a beauty in that ache, sharp, luminous, pure. It is the same beauty found in the moment just before dawn, when the world holds its breath between dark and light. It is the same beauty in the pause between a heartbeat and the next, the trembling instant where desire lives before fulfillment. Coyote's punishment was not cruelty alone. It was understanding. In his endless wandering, he learned what mortals never wish to know, that love untested by loss is merely comfort, and love that survives separation becomes divine. The gods sought to break him, yet in binding him to the earth, they bound love itself into its soil. Every wind that moves, every howl that shivers through the stars, reminds creation of what was once dared beneath their indifferent gaze.
There is tenderness in tragedy, if one knows how to listen. The myth does not ask for pity, it asks for recognition. It asks us to see ourselves in the shimmer of heat on sand, in the sound of longing carried by night. For who among us has not yearned for what we could not keep? Who has not felt love slip away like water through our fingers, leaving behind only its taste, its ghost, its ache? That ache is sacred. It means we have touched something real, something vast enough to change the shape of our souls. Coyote's story reminds us that the deepest connections are not measured by duration or possession, but by the way they awaken us to the infinite. Love's purpose is not to last, it is to transform, to break the shell of the self and let the heart spill outward, wild and uncontained, until it becomes one with everything it touches. And perhaps that is why the desert hums at night, why its silence is never truly silent. The world hums with all the love that has ever been felt, all the longing that was never fulfilled. Myths do not fade because they feed on that vibration. They are born from it, sustained by it. They are the dreams of the earth itself, its memory of every tender defiance that ever dared to bloom under a cruel sky. When the wind rises and you hear it moan across the emptiness, do not turn away. Listen. Somewhere in its current, the trickster still calls to the one he lost.
and somewhere in its soft reply, she still answers. You might not understand the words, but you will feel their meaning, the yearning, the devotion, the acceptance. It is the language of all who have loved beyond reason, beyond life, beyond form. There is a lesson hidden in their persistence. Love, when it becomes too vast for bodies to contain, does not die. It becomes part of the world's breath. It becomes the shimmer of the horizon, the echo of a voice you cannot place, the warmth that finds you when you thought you were forgotten. To love that deeply is to risk dissolution. To surrender that completely is to find eternity. And yet, even knowing the cost, we still choose it. Over and over, through every age and name, we fall again. Like Coyote beneath the moon, like Ayana beneath the stars, because something in us remembers that once, in the beginning, love created the first fire, that the ache itself is proof we belong to something greater than survival. If you walk the desert at twilight, when the sun bleeds into indigo and the air trembles between heat and cool, pause, close your eyes, feel the wind slide across your skin, hear the faint cry in the distance. It is not mere sound. It is the memory of everything that dared to feel. It is the pulse of the myth still alive beneath your feet, whispering that love is never lost, only transformed.
Maybe that is what the gods feared most. Not love's rebellion, but its endurance. For even divine law cannot erase what has been truly felt. Even silence cannot drown the echo of a heart that refuses to forget. And so the story endures, not as warning, not as tragedy, but as testament. The coyote still roams, the wind still sings, and the desert still keeps their secret beneath its endless sands. Every dusk, the horizon glows like an ember, as though the world itself remembers the fire they once became. Perhaps if you stand there long enough, you will feel it too, the faint trembling of the air, the ache that hums just beyond comprehension. You will not see them, yet you will know they are near. The trickster and his lover, bound in the rhythm of longing, shaping the silence with their eternal dance. It is said that the gods themselves, in the quietest hours, still listen to that song. They remember what they tried to destroy, and perhaps in their own cold way envy it. For no divine power, no eternal law can replicate the fragile perfection of love that chooses itself even in ruin. Love that burns knowing it must fade. Love that says yes to the pain because the joy was once real. Maybe that is the secret coyote carries in his howl. The reminder that to feel is to live, even if it ends in ash. The reminder that to surrender completely is to become infinite. That even when love dies in one form, it returns in another, as wind, as light, as sound, as myth. And maybe that is all the afterlife we ever truly need. not heavens or punishments, not judgment or reward, but the quiet knowing that something of us endures in what we've loved, that every tenderness ever shared ripples outward through time, touching strangers, stirring winds, shaping stories. So when the night grows still and the desert breathes against your ear, let yourself listen without fear. What you hear is not just a tale of loss. It is the pulse of creation itself, the heartbeat of longing that keeps the world alive. The myth does not end. It merely changes form, like wind through dunes, like light across faces, like love itself. And as long as someone remembers, as long as someone feels that quiet ache, the lovers will never vanish. They will remain, woven into the song of the earth, whispered through the air that moves between stars. And perhaps one day, when the world grows silent enough to listen, we will finally understand what Coyote knew all along, that love was never meant to be held. It was meant to become everything.